Hello, it's Sean here, and I'm just going to take you through my contribution to the beta release of CA3. So the first thing I will talk about is the token refresh that we implemented. I'll show you the Pi side first. So here we have our PubNub client on the Pi side. So when we initiate PubNub, we request the token, and once PubNub is initiated, we start a new thread with a function called initiate token refresh. So we take the initial token, we parse that token, we get the time to live, and then we calculate 30 seconds before the token will die, and we put the function to sleep for that amount of time. Once that timer is up, we request a new token from the server and set the token in the client. So this is in a while true, so this function will always be running on the thread and get the token when it needs it. Similarly to the Pi side, we have a token refresh logic on the client side in the JavaScript. So when we're setting up PubNub, we also parse the token, and we use the same algorithm to work out 30 seconds before the token dies. So on that we set the timeout equal to the refresh interval there, and we call refresh token. It's a constant function inside of the setup PubNub. So yeah, we just call a new token and parse the token, do the same thing again, and call a timeout on the function. So it's running infinitely and only calling whenever it needs a new token. So in our last release, we noticed that there was a bit of a bottleneck in our scan process. So before, at the start of the scan process, we would take an image of the employee, and then we would immediately look to identify the employee, and that could take a really long time depending on how far down the list the employee was, or if they weren't on the list at all, it would take an extremely long time. So to speed up the whole scan process, I sort of took the face detection away from that part. So when the image is uploaded first, we just detect is a face detected. That can be seen in this function here. So it's called, and it's actually quite fast. So we just make sure that a face is detected, and then the employee can continue on with the scan process. That means that we don't have to wait during the scan for the function to run. And then whenever the scan is finished and we upload all the scan data, then we go through the identification process, and that frees up the scan. So yeah, worked on that part. I was also responsible for setting up the logic for changing zone requirements. So like if a zone you didn't need to wear the helmet on a specific day for whatever reason, you can change the requirements for the zone. And I also set up the logic on the Pi side to get the zone requirements. It's pretty small, but yeah, I worked on that part as well. So responsible for handling the logic for setting zones online and offline. We also have a function that's running on a thread here, so it's running infinitely. This function is responsible for handling to check when zones are offline or online. So we run it every 60 seconds. This is just so that we can update the client side to let them know frequently whether a zone is online or offline. So we get all the zones, and we check their attribute last online. We compare it to the current time, and if that time is greater than the threshold, so we have it set here to 100 seconds, and it was online previously or set online previously, we update it to be offline. And we also publish a message to a channel that the client side can see, letting them know that the zone is offline. We update the zone page to represent whether they're online or offline with like a green light or a red light. We also have the handler here, so whenever the Pi sends a message on this specific channel, we update their row in the database saying when they last sent the message, and setting them online. Also, we will also publish on the return online status channel with the map of all the zones. So this will frequently update the client side with whether the zones are online or offline. So we can see here on the JavaScript side of things, on the client side, we set up a listener for the online status channel. So it calls this function here every time we update the zone's online status. So this will dynamically change the colors of zones online representation on the client side. So I will show you that now. So you can see here all the zones are currently online with the red light just showing that they're offline. So I'm going to simulate the pie for zone 1, which is the welding area. So anytime a message comes from the pie, you should see now in a second that the light will become green. There we go. So now the clients can see when zones are online or offline. And also, I'm pretty sure Roman has messages being sent every 1 minute from the pie. So even when there's nothing going on in the scan process, we can still tell when the pie is online. I was also responsible for creating the logic that dynamically pushes notifications into this list. So you can see it here in the JavaScript. This function add notification to list is called every time we get a scan violation to the database. So this means that the client doesn't have to refresh the page to see the most recent notifications coming through. I was also responsible for setting up the logic for getting the statistics based on scans. That's for zones and employees. So you can see here we've got 25% of scans detect lack of PPE equipment. That can also be seen if I go to an employee. Let's go to Roman, for example. Yeah, so we can see as 53% scans detect or lack PPE. So to do that, I set up a pipeline or an aggregate. So we have a function for the zones and we have a function for the employees. These are called every time we load into either the employee page or zone page. So I made this pipeline function here, which basically returns the group functions and the project functions that are passed to MongoDB when we want to get statistics. Basically, they just return the total amount of scans that were taken for that zone or that employee, and it also returns the percentage of scans that detected a lack of PPE. So that can be seen there. And lastly, I sort of just set up the functionality for making like these tables clickable. So like if I go into Roman, for example, it takes me to Roman's page, and it also works for the zones. So if I go into the welding area here, all these zones or all these scans are clickable. It just makes it easier to like get into specific scans. Like here we go, an invalid scan. There's Noah. It just makes the front end a lot more fluid and intuitive. It also works on the profile pages. So we have Isaac here. I can see all his recent scans, and I can also click them just in case you want to see how the scan actually looked. So there's a great photo of Isaac. So for CA3, I'll just talk about my contribution in relation to the other two team members, Roman and Noah. I feel like the other two guys worked really, really hard. Roman had probably the hardest role for this project. He had to transport the hardware and a lot of things broke, but he wouldn't stop working until everything was working again. So I felt quite bad for him, but he did a really, really good job. And Noah did a fantastic job with the front end. As you can see, the front end looked really, really nice, and the functionality, how everything feels, that was all Noah's hard work. He did a really good job. Um, so if I was to compare myself to them, I feel like I worked pretty hard. Maybe I didn't have as much work to do as Roman, because I feel like he had to work non-stop um, to get everything done, and we relied so heavily on him having the hardware working correctly for everything else to function. So um, I do feel like I worked pretty hard and did a lot of work, but Roman definitely had the hardest part. So in terms of what I learned from this module, the first thing would be Python. I never really used Python before this module, so it was really nice to get to use it, and I actually really like Python now. It's really nice to write with. It's a nice language. So security, I didn't really understand a lot about like security before this, but like through doing this project and really getting hands on with it, I've really learned a lot, like about encryption, tokens, um, all that sort of thing. Yeah, and another big thing was like teamwork. So I never really did any big projects of this size before this module, so I learned so much about how different roles work and how they communicate with each other. So yeah, that was really nice to learn. I also learned about just like hosting websites and all that sort of thing. Like we didn't really get to do any of that before, so it was really nice, getting to understand like domains and especially like EC2s and all that. I definitely heard of them before, and I definitely understand what they are now and how they work. Although I didn't deploy this project, that was Roman's job. I'm really looking forward to deploying my own web application for the solo project. So yeah, they're the big things I learned from this module.